Welcome back, dear traveler. Tonight we journey to ancient Greece, where the most unusual god awaits, a deity born twice, from death itself. His name is Dionysus, god of wine, of ecstasy, of theater and transformation. Neither fully Olympian nor mortal, but something entirely new. To understand this strange god, we must return to his beginning, a love story that ended in flames and began in starlight. In the city of Thebes lived Princess Semele, daughter of King Cadmus. Her beauty captured the attention of the king of gods himself. Zeus descended from Olympus disguised as a mortal man. Night after night, he visited Semele in secret, and love blossomed between them. Their love burned bright through spring and summer. Semele grew round with child, a baby who would shake the very foundations of Olympus. But love between gods and mortals rarely escapes divine notice. On Mount Olympus, Queen Hera watched, and jealousy poisoned her immortal heart. Hera despised Zeus's many loves, but this mortal woman carrying divine offspring. This she could not allow to continue unchallenged. The goddess descended to Thebes in disguise, an old nurse with kind eyes and poison on her tongue. She found Semele alone. "Dear child," Hera whispered, "how do you know your lover is truly Zeus? Any man might claim divine parentage to win a princess." Doubt crept into Semele's heart like winter frost. That night, when Zeus came to her, she made him swear an unbreakable oath. "Promise to grant whatever I ask," she pleaded. Zeus, bound by love, swore upon the river Styx, an oath even gods cannot break. "Then show me your true form," Semele demanded. "Let me see you as the gods see you." Zeus paled, knowing what must come. He could not refuse. The disguise fell away as divine radiance erupted. Lightning and thunder made flesh, beauty too terrible for mortal eyes. Semele burst into flames, consumed by the very glory she had wished to see. But Zeus moved faster than fire itself. He snatched the unborn child from the flames. Then, with divine power, he cut open his own thigh and placed the infant within. For 3 months, the child grew within the king of gods. When the time came, Zeus gave birth, father becoming mother. Thus was Dionysus born twice, first from his mortal mother's womb, then from his divine father's thigh. The god of wine had arrived. To understand Dionysus, we must first understand the world he was born into, Mount Olympus, where the immortal gods held eternal court. Zeus sat upon the highest throne, king of gods and men. His thunderbolt could shatter mountains, yet his heart was easily captured. Many children had Zeus fathered, Athena born from his head, Apollo and Artemis, Hermes the messenger. But Dionysus was different from them all. For Dionysus alone among the great Olympians had a mortal mother. This made him both less and more than his divine siblings. Zeus carried guilt like a stone in his immortal chest. His love for Semele had destroyed her, and now their child bore that tragedy. Hera watched the infant with cold fury. Every child of Zeus's wandering affections reminded her of betrayals she could never forget. She had destroyed the mother. Now she would hunt the son. No child of that Theban woman would find peace while Hera lived. Zeus knew his wife's wrath too well. The child could not remain on Olympus. Hera would find ways to harm him despite all protections. Hermes, swift messenger of the gods, was tasked with hiding the divine child. He wrapped the baby in clouds and descended to earth. There existed a hidden mountain called Nysa, where nymphs danced in eternal spring, and no god's gaze could easily penetrate its mists. Here Hermes delivered the infant to the care of the mountain nymphs, beautiful spirits of stream and forest, who would raise him as their own. Among his new guardians was one figure unlike the rest, old Silenus, a satyr of great age and unexpected wisdom. Can you picture him? Silenus had wandered the world since time's beginning. He knew secrets that even gods had forgotten, hidden beneath his drunken foolishness. The nymphs taught young Dionysus to dance and sing, to move through forests like water through stones, to speak with animals as kin. Silenus taught him deeper things, the names of stars, the language of growing things, why the seasons turn and rivers remember their sources. Strange things began to happen around the growing boy. Vines sprouted where he walked. Flowers bloomed when he laughed. His power was awakening. Animals came to him without fear. Leopards lay at his feet like house cats. Serpents coiled gently around his arms without harm. One autumn, the boy discovered clusters of purple fruit hanging heavy on the wild vines. He crushed them, curious, and tasted something new. The juice fermented in clay jars he made. When he tasted the transformed liquid, something ancient awakened in his divine blood. Wine was born. He shared his discovery with the nymphs and Silenus. They drank and laughed and danced until stars wheeled overhead. Joy had found its liquid form. But Silenus also taught the boy wine's darker nature. Too much brought madness, destroyed judgment, turned friends to enemies and love to violence. Wine frees what is caged within, Silenus explained. It releases both the poet and the beast. The gift requires wisdom to wield. Years passed on hidden Nysa like dreams within dreams. The boy grew toward godhood, his powers deepening with each season's turn. But Hera never stopped searching. Her jealousy knew neither rest nor forgetting. Eventually, she discovered where Zeus had hidden his precious child. She could not touch the boy directly. Zeus's protections held. But she could reach those who sheltered him and make them instruments of suffering. Ino, Dionysus's mortal aunt, had taken him in after the nymphs. Hera struck her mind with divine madness that burned away all reason. In her frenzy, Ino threw herself and her own son into the sea. Another family destroyed by Hera's endless pursuit of the twice-born child. To save the boy from similar fate, Zeus transformed young Dionysus into a kid, a baby goat, disguising divinity beneath animal form. As a goat, he wandered with Silenus through distant lands, hidden from Hera's sight. These wandering years shaped who he would become. He learned that he was both, mortal and divine, joy and madness, life and death. His nature held opposites in eternal embrace. As god of wine, he embodied liberation, the moment when careful masks fall away and the true self emerges, for better or worse. As god of theater, he ruled the space where humans become other, wearing masks to reveal truths too dangerous to speak directly. As god of fertility, he was the green force that pushes through stone, the vine that refuses to stop growing, life itself unkillable. He walked between worlds, not quite Olympian in his mortality's memory, not quite mortal in his divine power. An outsider everywhere he went. This made some gods scorn him, some mortals fear him. But to those who felt trapped by the world's rigid rules, he offered escape. His gift was losing oneself to find oneself, the madness that clears vision, the surrender that brings freedom. Dangerous medicine, but sometimes necessary. Women especially heard his call. In Greek society, their lives were circumscribed by walls and expectations. Dionysus offered them the mountains. Those who followed him became Maenads, wild women who left homes and husbands to dance in moonlit forests, wrapped in sacred frenzy. They wore fawnskins and carried Thyrsus staffs. In their trance, they felt the god's presence flowing through them like wine through water. Their worship was freedom from everything society demanded of them: propriety, submission, silence. In the mountains, they became wild and whole. But Maenads could also be terrible. When their frenzy turned dark, they could tear apart wild animals, or men who spied upon their rights. Male followers came too, the satyrs, half-human creatures of forest and desire. They had been companions of Dionysus since his childhood on Nysa. Part human, part goat, always celebrating. Satyrs embodied the animal joy that civilization tries to tame. With Dionysus, they could be fully themselves. Together, Maenads and satyrs formed the Thyasus, Dionysus's sacred procession that moved through the world spreading his worship and his wine. When the Thyasus came to a city, some citizens hid in fear. Others felt an inexplicable pull, leaving everything to join the dance. To join was to be transformed, to shed the careful self built for survival and become something stranger, wilder, more alive. Feel that call. Those who resisted often fared worse. Dionysus demanded recognition, Deni a god, and the god may take what he is owed by force. This was the paradox. The god of joy was also the god of madness. The liberator could become the destroyer. Light needs shadow to exist. The symbols of his worship carried this duality. The grape, crushed to become wine. Destruction transforming into joy. Death becoming new life. The ivy that crowned his followers grew ever green, never dying even in deepest winter. Eternal life through the plant that refuses to surrender. The thyrsus staff, fennel wrapped in vines, topped with pine cone, looked harmless but could strike with divine force. Hidden power in gentle guise. Leopards and panthers served as his sacred beasts, wild cats that could be gentle or deadly. They pulled his golden chariot across the world. Snakes twined around his worshippers without striking. The serpent represented both danger and wisdom, death and renewal through shedding of skin. At mountain sanctuaries, his followers gathered for secret rites. What happened there was never fully spoken. The mysteries remained mysteries, known only to initiates. They said the initiates experienced death and rebirth, that they died as their old selves and rose transformed. The mysteries offered glimpses of eternity. The theater itself was born from these rites. Actors in masks became others, gods, heroes, monsters, and audiences watched their own stories reflected back. Tragedy showed noble suffering and divine justice. Comedy showed human folly and bodily joy. Both were sacred to the twice-born God. Through wine and theater and ecstatic dance, mortals touched something beyond their daily lives. A glimpse of what it meant to be divine. This was Dionysus's great gift to humanity, not merely wine, but transformation itself. The knowledge that we need not stay what we were born. And this was why the old order feared him. If anyone could change, what happened to the hierarchies that kept the powerful in power? Young Dionysus had grown now to full divine maturity. The time of hiding was over. He would claim his birthright among the gods. But first he must prove himself. Establish his worship. Make mortals acknowledge what he was. Not some charlatan, but true son of Zeus. Many would doubt him. A god with a mortal mother. Born twice. Raised by satyrs. Surely some trick, some delusion, some foreign corruption. His own family in Thebes denied him most fiercely. His mother's sisters claimed Samael had lied about Zeus, paid for her arrogance with death. Pentheus now ruled Thebes, son of Agave, grandson of Cadmus, young, proud, and certain that this Dionysus was threat to proper order. Everything Dionysus represented, Pentheus despised. Women abandoning homes. Men dancing like fools. Wine loosening careful control. Unacceptable, dangerous. Foreign. The stage was set for confrontation. Order against ecstasy, rigid control against liberating chaos, mortal pride against divine truth. Listen to what unfolds. Dionysus gathered his followers at the borders of his mother's homeland. Maenads and satyrs, transformed mortals, wild beasts. His thyrsus ready to march. He came not with spears and shields, but with wine and music and dance. His conquest would be of hearts, not cities. But make no mistake, this gentle approach masked terrible power. Those who accepted him would know joy. Those who refused would know despair. His mother had died here, consumed by divine fire for loving Zeus. Now her son returned to redeem her memory and claim his inheritance. The women of Thebes were already slipping away to the mountains, answering his call. Even Agave, who denied him, felt the pull. The god had come home. Before Dionysus reached Thebes, he traveled across the wine, dark sea, spreading his worship to distant shores. One voyage would become legend. He stood alone on a rocky headland, appearing as a beautiful youth with dark flowing hair. No divine marks visible, just a traveler waiting. A ship approached. Tyrrhenian pirates who raided these waters, capturing travelers for ransom or slavery. They saw an easy prize on shore. They rowed to shore and seized the youth roughly, laughing at their fortune. His rich clothing suggested wealth. Someone would pay well for him. They bound him with ropes and dragged him aboard. But the ropes would not hold. They slipped from his wrists like water, falling to the deck. The helmsman Acoetes watched with growing unease. Something about this captive was wrong, or rather too right, too beautiful, too calm, too knowing. Release him. Acoetes urged his captain. This is no mortal. Look at him, this is a god among us. We court destruction. The captain laughed and struck him. A god, this pretty boy, he's worth gold, nothing more. Set sail, we'll find buyers in the east. They set sail toward open water. For a time nothing happened. The pirates grew bold again, planning how to spend their ransom money. Then the air grew sweet with an impossible fragrance. Wine. The scent of wine filled the ship, though no casks were opened. Wine began to flow across the deck, pouring from nowhere, pooling around the pirates' feet, dark and sweet and endless. The ship itself was weeping wine. Grape vines erupted from the mast, climbing impossibly fast, wrapping around the rigging, hanging heavy with ripe fruit in seconds. Ivy twisted around the oars, making them immovable. The sails transformed into curtains of woven vine leaves. The ship was becoming a garden. Music filled the air, pipes and drums from invisible musicians. The song was wild and beautiful and terrifying, as if the wind itself was celebrating. Then the animals appeared. Lions materialized on deck, shaking their great manes. Leopards prowled between frozen pirates. Bears rose on hind legs, roaring. The beautiful youth was gone. In his place stood a god, Dionysus in full divine glory, eyes blazing, crowned with grape leaves and ivy. You would make a slave of a god. His voice was gentle, but it shook the ship like thunder. You would bind the Lord of Wine. The pirates screamed and ran, but there was nowhere to go. The ship was far from shore, and wild beasts blocked every path on deck. One by one, they chose the only escape they could see. They threw themselves into the sea, preferring drowning to divine wrath. But death was not their fate. As each pirate hit the water, his body twisted, shrank, transformed. Scales replaced skin. Fins sprouted from limbs. They became dolphins, sleek gray creatures leaping through the wine, dark waves. Pirates no more, but forever creatures of the sea. Dionysus ruled. Only Acoetes remained, kneeling on the transformed deck. He had tried to warn them. He had recognized the divine. Dionysus remembered mercy as well as wrath. You alone had eyes to see, Dionysus said, offering his hand. Rise and follow me. Your faith will not go unrewarded. Acoetes became one of his most devoted followers. Proof that those who honor the gods, even in frightening moments, find favor rather than destruction. Word spread across the Mediterranean. Dolphins that had once been men swam alongside ships, warning sailors to honor Dionysus. The god was making himself known. Now Dionysus turned his procession toward Thebes at last. His mother's city, his birthplace. The land that had denied him longest awaited his arrival. The women of Thebes had already answered his call. They gathered on Mount Cithaeron and in the wild places, dancing themselves into sacred frenzy. Among them danced Agave, sister of Samael, mother of King Pentheus. She who had denied her sister's divine lover now felt that god's power herself. King Pentheus watched his kingdom unraveling. Women abandoned their looms and children. Respectable matrons howled on mountainsides. Foreign madness infected his orderly city. He sent soldiers to arrest the revelers. But they returned empty-handed, speaking of vines that bound them, of earth that swallowed their weapons, of fear. Reports came of a stranger leading the movement, a beautiful youth with flowing hair who smiled at all threats. Pentheus ordered his capture. Dionysus allowed himself to be taken, as he had with the pirates. He walked calmly into the palace, chains loose on wrists that could not be bound. They stood face to face at last, the young king and the young god. Mortal authority confronting divine truth, neither willing to bend. Who are you? Pentheus demanded. Where do you come from? What is this cult you spread through my city like disease? I serve Dionysus. The stranger replied, born of your aunt Samael and the king of gods. Born here in Thebes, in fact. I've come home. Pentheus laughed, harsh, dismissive. Samael's bastard, that old lie. My grandmother died for her arrogance, claiming Zeus as her lover. There is no God here. You deny your own cousin. Dionysus asked softly. You deny the God who stands before you. That is a dangerous choice, young king. The king ordered him imprisoned in the deepest dungeon. Dionysus went peacefully, still smiling. The guards could not understand why their prisoner seemed so calm. Heavy bronze chains were fastened to his wrists. Iron doors were sealed. Pentheus believed himself victorious, the foreign troublemaker safely contained. He went to sleep satisfied that order was restored. But in the darkness of night, the earth itself began to tremble beneath Thebes. An earthquake shook the palace to its foundations. Columns cracked. Walls split. The bronze chains in the dungeon shattered like dried clay. Fire erupted at Samael's old tomb, the scorched chamber where she had died. Flames danced on stone that should not burn, honoring her memory. Pentheus ran to the dungeon, demanding his prisoner be brought out, but found only empty chains. The door stood open. Dionysus was gone. He emerged into the courtyard to find the stranger waiting, unharmed, still smiling. Did you think bronze could hold a god? Dionysus asked mildly. Pentheus drew his sword. I'll kill you myself, charlatan! But the blade passed through Dionysus like through smoke. There and not there simultaneously. I offer you peace, Dionysus said, reforming solid before the king. Accept me as God and cousin. Let your people worship freely. There need be no war. But Pentheus was beyond hearing. Pride had deafened him. Fear had made him rigid. He would not bow to this smiling stranger who defied all rules. Then let me show you something else, Dionysus said, his tone shifting to something more persuasive, almost seductive. The women on the mountain. Wouldn't you like to see them? Pentheus's anger flickered. Something else moved behind his eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or darker desire. The Maenads? The mad women? What of them? They dance in ecstasy on Cytheran slopes. Wild, free, abandoned to pleasure. I could take you there, let you watch them hidden. The king should have refused. Should have seen the trap closing around him. But divine madness was already touching his mind, loosening his judgment. Yes, Pentheus heard himself say. Take me to them. Let me see these wild women for myself. I must understand the threat they pose. But you cannot go as king, Dionysus explained, almost apologetically. They would recognize you, flee or attack. You must be disguised, as one of them, as a woman. Pentheus's remaining reason recoiled. A king dressed as a Maenad, absurd, humiliating, impossible, yet he could not say no. Dionysus led him to a private chamber and began the transformation. Women's robes replaced armor. A wig of long curls covered his military, cropped hair. The king looked down at himself in growing horror, and yet did not stop the process. The madness held him, made degradation feel like adventure. A thyrsus was placed in his hand. Perfect, Dionysus pronounced. Now you look like any other devotee. The Maenads will never know their king walks among them. They slipped from the palace in darkness, the god and the doomed king. Through sleeping streets, past guards who somehow did not see them passing. Up the mountain paths they climbed, toward the distant torchlight and drumming. Pentheus stumbled in his unfamiliar robes, but Dionysus steadied him, almost tenderly. The sounds of worship grew louder. Wild music, ecstatic cries, the stamp of dancing feet. Pentheus's heart raced. Soon he would see them, soon. They reached the sacred grove. In the moonlit clearing, dozens of women danced in divine frenzy, including Agave, Pentheus's own mother, wilder than any. Pentheus stared, transfixed. His mother's hair was loose and wild. Her eyes saw nothing but the god. She had become something he did not recognize. Climb that tree, Dionysus whispered. You'll see better from above. They won't notice you there among the branches. Still gripped by madness, Pentheus climbed. Up through the branches until he perched high above the dancers, looking down on their mysteries, a perfect vantage point. He did not notice that Dionysus had stepped away, vanishing into shadows. He did not notice the god's voice, suddenly echoing across the clearing. My faithful ones, the god's voice thundered. An enemy spy watches from above.
One who denies me, who persecutes my worship.
Look up and see him. Every Maenad face turned upward. Every torch was raised. And in their god-maddened eyes, they did not see their king dressed in women's clothes. They saw a mountain lion, a beast to be hunted, torn apart, sacrificed to their god in bloody ecstasy. The hunt began with a terrible scream. Agev led them. His own mother, most frenzied of all, calling the others to bring down the beast. Her hands reached for the tree trunk. With impossible strength, the Maenads tore the great pine from the earth. Roots ripped from soil. The tree crashed down, and Pentheus with it. He landed among them, scrambling to his knees. His wig had fallen away. His face was exposed. He reached toward his mother with desperate hands. "Mother!" he screamed.
It's me! It's Pentheus, your son! Mother, please look at me! See your own child!
But Agev could not hear, could not see. The god's madness filled her completely. She saw only the beast that defied her lord Dionysus. Her hands closed around him. The other Maenads surged forward. What happened next belongs to darkness. The tearing, the blood, the triumphant screams. When it was done, Agev stood holding her trophy, the head of the lion she had killed. Pride blazed in her maddened eyes. She had served her god. She began the walk down the mountain, carrying her prize to show the city. To show her son the king what his mother had accomplished. Dionysus watched from the shadows, his vengeance complete. The king who denied him was destroyed. Thebes would never doubt his divinity again. But in his eyes, if one looked closely, there might have been the smallest gleam of sorrow. Pentheus had been his cousin too. Family destroying family. At the palace gates old Cadmus waited. Founder of Thebes, father of Samael and Agev, grandfather of both the god and the dead king. He had gathered what remained of Pentheus from the mountain. All he could find scattered among the pines. A grandfather's terrible duty. Agev approached, still blazing with triumph.
Father, look what I've brought. I killed a great lion on the mountain. See how strong your daughter is.
Cadmus looked at what she held. His heart shattered, but he kept his voice gentle. The only way through was slow, careful truth. Daughter, he said softly, look again. Look carefully at your prize. What color is its mane? What shape its face? Look with your own eyes. The madness began to lift like morning fog. Agev blinked. Her eyes focused. The lion's head began to look different, familiar in a terrible way. Father, she whispered, voice cracking, whose face is this? Why does the lion have? Why does it look like? The scream that tore from her throat echoed across Thebes. In that sound was every mother's nightmare. The knowledge of what her own hands had done. She fell to her knees, clutching her son's remains to her chest. The divine madness was gone, leaving only human agony in its wake. Dionysus appeared before the grieving family, no longer disguised, his divine nature fully manifest. He had proven his point. Thebes would never deny him again. I am Dionysus, he declared, son of Zeus and Samael, your sister, your daughter, the one you called a liar. Do you see the truth now? Cadmus bowed his head in acceptance. Too late, too costly, but acceptance nonetheless. The twice-born god had claimed his birthright in blood and tears. The sun rose over Thebes, but brought no warmth. The city that had denied Dionysus now knew him. Through blood and broken hearts, Agev was led away by gentle hands, her mind shattered. She would leave these forever, exile the only mercy available to her. Cadmus watched his daughter go, then turned to prepare his grandson's remains for proper burial. The founder of Thebes had outlived his legacy's hope. The women who had danced as Maenads returned to their homes, remembering only fragments of their frenzy. They did not speak of what they remembered. Dionysus stood at Samael's tomb, where divine fire still flickered on scorched stones. His victory felt hollow in his chest, heavy as stone. He had proven his divinity. Thebes would never doubt him again. But Pentheus had been his cousin, Samael's sister's son. Family blood stained his triumph. Was this the only way? He whispered to his mother's flames, "Did you watch from the underworld? Did you see what your son has become? The fire flickered in response, or perhaps it was only wind. But in that moment, Dionysus felt Samael's presence, distant and unreachable in Hades's realm. She had died for loving Zeus. Consumed by glory she had only wished to see. And now she lingered among shades, denied even the Elysian fields. It isn't right, Dionysus said aloud, rising to his feet. You bore a god. You loved the King of Heaven. You deserve better than shadow. A new mission burned in his divine heart. Not vengeance this time, but love. He would descend to the realm of the dead and bring his mother home. No god had done such a thing before, entered Hades's realm to rescue a mortal shade. But Dionysus was no ordinary god. He knew death intimately. He himself had died, in a sense. Torn from his dying mother's womb, only half formed. He had been reborn from his father's flesh. Death held no terror for him. His followers did not understand where they were going. Only that their god led them, and they would follow wherever his path wound. They traveled south, toward the Argolid, where ancient Lake Lerna held one of the entrances to the underworld. A bottomless pool that touched Hades's realm. At the lake's edge, Dionysus paused. The water was black as night, still as glass, reflecting nothing. It smelled of earth and endings. Wait for me here, he told his followers. Where I go, you cannot follow. If I do not return by the third dawn, continue my worship without me. Silenus pushed forward, old face creased with worry. My boy, you cannot mean to enter the realm of Hades alone. Let me come with you. Dionysus embraced his old guardian, the satyr who had raised him, taught him, loved him through all the years of hiding. This I must do alone, father. He turned back to the black water. To enter the underworld living, he must surrender some of his divine protection. Become vulnerable to death itself. He thought of his mother. Her face he knew only from stories and dreams. Her love that had created him. Her death that had nearly ended him. With a single breath, he stepped into the lake. The cold water closed over him instantly, black, heavy, pulling him down toward realms below the world. Down he sank, past the places where fish swim, past the reaches of any light. The pressure grew, but he did not need to breathe. The water began to change, thickening, growing warmer despite the darkness. He was passing through the boundary between worlds, leaving life behind. Then his feet touched stone. He stood on the shore of the river Styx, the boundary river of the dead. The underworld had accepted him. The air was thick with the whispers of shades, countless dead drifting past, unaware of the living God among them. So many souls, so much sorrow. Ahead, a boat approached through the mist. Charon the ferryman, ancient as death itself, come to collect another passenger. His empty eyes found Dionysus. A living god walks my shore, Charon rasped, voice like wind through dead reeds. This is unexpected. Do you have payment for passage? Dionysus held out his hand, and a golden coin appeared. Not mortal currency, but divine offering. I come on business of gods and mothers. Will you ferry me? Charon took the coin, bit it once, nodded slowly. Enter. But know that leaving is harder than arriving. Many who enter here never return. The boat glided across the Styx in silence. Around them, pale forms drifted in the dark water. Souls waiting for passage, reaching toward the living God. Dionysus could feel their longing, the desperate wish to return, to feel sunlight again, to live once more. He understood that longing better than most gods could. The far shore emerged from mist. Gray rocks, pale flowers that had never seen sun, the beginning of Hades's vast domain stretching into endless darkness. Charon brought the boat to rest. Follow the path. The gates lie ahead. Beyond them, the lord of this realm decides all fates. Even yours, young god. The path wound through fields of asphodel. Ghostly flowers swaying though no wind blew. Shades wandered among them, faces blank, memories fading into eternity. He searched each face he passed, looking for his mother. But the shades all looked alike after enough time in this place. Gray, faded, diminished. Then he heard it, the distant sound of barking, deep and threefold. Cerberus guarded the gates ahead, the three-headed hound who permitted entry but rarely exit. The beast was enormous, each head the size of a chariot, each mouth filled with teeth like bronze swords. His 3 pairs of eyes fixed on Dionysus. But Dionysus did not reach for weapons. Instead, he reached into the divine essence of his nature and drew forth something unexpected. Wine, sweet and dark. He placed 3 bowls before the hound, 1 for each head. Even guardians deserve rest, he said softly. Even monsters deserve a moment of peace. One head sniffed, then lapped at the wine. Then another. Then the third. Divine wine worked even on beasts of the underworld, bringing drowsy contentment. The great hound settled onto his haunches, then lay down entirely. A mountain of fur and fangs rendered peaceful by the god of wine's gift. Beyond the gates, the underworld opened into vastness. Dionysus could see distant regions. Tartarus's smoking depths, Elysium's golden glow, and between them endless gray plains. His mother would not be in Tartarus. She had committed no great crimes. Nor in Elysium. That was reserved for heroes and the blessed. She would be in between. He walked for what felt like hours, though time moved strangely in this place. Past countless shades, through regions of mist and shadow, always searching. Then, near a pool of still black water, he saw her. A shade sitting alone, more distinct than the others, as if her spirit refused to fully fade. Mother. His voice cracked. A god's voice breaking like a mortal child's. She turned, and though her face was gray, he knew her instantly. My son. Semele rose, her shade form flickering with something almost like warmth. My beautiful boy, you came for me. After all these years you came. They could not truly embrace. His hands passed through her form, and she could not feel his warmth. But they stood close, closer than they had ever been in life. I never knew you, Dionysus whispered. I was born as you died. But I've carried you with me every day in every vine, every celebration, every breath. I know, she said. I've watched from here. I've seen you grow, struggle, triumph. My heart broke when you suffered. It sang when you found joy. I'm taking you home, Dionysus declared, back to the light. Back to Olympus where you belong. No argument. I didn't cross the Styx for conversation. But Semele shook her head sadly. That's not how death works, my love. Hades rules here, and no shade leaves without his permission, not even for a god's son. Then I'll ask him. Dionysus took his mother's hand, or tried to, maintaining the gesture despite its impossibility. Come with me. We'll face him together. The palace of Hades rose from the darkness. Black stone that seemed to absorb light, towers that scraped a sky that wasn't there, terrible and magnificent. At the great doors, skeleton guards barred the way. But when Dionysus announced himself, son of Zeus, god of wine, they stepped aside. Some names open any door. The throne room was vast and cold, lit by fires that gave no warmth. On twin thrones of black iron sat the rulers of the dead. Hades, lord of the underworld, brother of Zeus. Dark-bearded, stern, wearing a crown of black metal. Beside him, Persephone, queen of the dead. Spring's daughter trapped in shadow. Nephew. Hades's voice echoed like stones falling into a well. You've caused quite a disturbance. Cerberus will have a headache for a century. Not deeply, but respectfully. God to God, uncle, Aunt Persephone. I come to ask a boon. The return of my mother's shade to the living world. Hades laughed, a sound like grinding bones. The living world. No shade returns there. That is the fundamental law of my realm. You ask the impossible. I am the twice-born god, Dionysus replied calmly. I was ripped from death's edge and lived. I know impossible things can happen. So did you once. He turned to Persephone. You understand, queen. You cross between worlds every year, death and life, dark and light. The boundary is not absolute. Persephone's eyes softened. She too had been taken from her mother. Demeter had mourned her daughter, as Dionysus mourned his mother, grief matching grief across generations. Husband, she said quietly, placing her hand on Hades's arm. Perhaps there is a way. Not to break your laws, but to transform the situation. Hades turned to his wife, and something passed between them. The wordless communication of partners who had spent eons together. He sighed, a sound like wind through tombs. Semele cannot return as mortal shade, Hades pronounced. But if she were to become something else, divine, perhaps, that would be a different matter entirely. Make her a goddess, Persephone elaborated. You have that power, nephew, son of Zeus, wielder of transformation. Change her nature, and she may leave freely. Dionysus turned to his mother, understanding flooding through him. He had the power to change mortals. He had turned pirates to dolphins. He could make his mother divine. Mother, he said, taking her immaterial hands in his, I give you what love and divine blood can offer. I make you Thyone, immortal, eternal, free. Light erupted in the dark throne room, golden warm, the light of Olympus itself flooding through the shadows. Semele's shade began to change. Color returned to her form. Solidity replaced shadow. The gray death pallor faded, replaced by divine radiance. Semele was becoming something new. When the light faded, Thyone stood where Semele's shade had been. No longer mortal, no longer dead, but goddess eternal. Radiant with divine fire that could no longer harm her. Mother and son embraced at last. Truly embraced, solid arms around solid form, tears of joy mixing between them. Death had been defeated by love. Even Hades smiled, a rare sight quickly hidden. Go then, both of you. Return to the light. My realm is not diminished by this one escape. Hand in hand, god and goddess ascended from the underworld. Not through the lake this time, but through paths that only the divine could walk. They emerged into sunlight on a Greek hillside, and Thyone gasped, her first breath of living air in years beyond counting. The world was beautiful again. The Dionysus had waited faithfully, and they cheered as their god returned, then fell silent in wonder at the radiant goddess beside him. His mother, restored. Dionysus led his mother toward Olympus, where she would take her place among the gods. His first great quest was complete, but the world had more to offer him. For while he had walked in the underworld, word of his deeds had spread across the mortal world. And on a certain island, a woman wept alone. The island was Naxos, and the woman was Ariadne, princess of Crete, who had betrayed her own family to help the hero Theseus kill the Minotaur. She had given Theseus the thread that guided him through the labyrinth. She had fled with him, abandoning her father's kingdom. He had promised marriage. And then Theseus had abandoned her on this island while she slept, sailing away without a word, leaving her to wake alone on a foreign shore. Why? She screamed at the waves.
I gave up everything. My home, my family, my future, all for you, and you left me here to die.
The sea did not answer. The waves kept coming, indifferent to her suffering. She fell to her knees in the sand, weeping until she could not weep anymore. She did not notice the vines beginning to grow around her, creeping across the sand, gentle tendrils reaching toward her like comforting hands. She did not hear the music. Why do you weep? The voice was gentle, curious, somehow warm despite the grief surrounding them. Ariadne looked up to see the most beautiful being she had ever seen. Dionysus stood before her, crowned with grape leaves, eyes holding depths of both joy and sorrow. He knew abandonment. Hera had hunted him since birth, he understood. Ariadne told him everything. The labyrinth, the thread, the escape, the promise, the betrayal. Words poured from her like wine from an endless cup. He listened without judgment, without hurry. When she finished, silence held them both. The kind of silence that exists between those who truly understand each other. Theseus was a fool. Dionysus said finally, to abandon such courage, such loyalty, such beauty. He does not deserve the memory you waste on him. What does it matter? Ariadne whispered. I have nothing now. No home, no family, no future. I am no one, on an island going nowhere. You are Ariadne. Dionysus offered his hand, and when she took it, warmth spread through her. Divine warmth, the heat of wine and summer and life itself. Come with me, he said. Not as a refugee or a castaway, but as a companion. I have been alone too long. I think perhaps you have too. She looked at him. This strange god, this bringer of madness and joy, and saw something she recognized. Another outsider. Another survivor. Another heart that had learned to keep going. Wes, she said. It was the smallest word, but it changed everything. A princess without a kingdom had found a god without a home. Together, they would be both. Their wedding was celebrated across the mortal world and Olympus alike. Even Zeus blessed the union. His son had chosen well, finding love in unexpected sorrow. As wedding gift, Dionysus placed a crown upon Ariadne's head. 7 jewels that blazed with light, each one a captured star given form. This crown will shine forever, he promised. And when you join the immortals, it will become a constellation. Your story written in the sky for eternity. Through their love, Ariadne became immortal. Transformed as Samael had been, raised from mortal princess to divine goddess, wife of Dionysus for all time. And when she finally ascended fully to the heavens, her crown rose with her, becoming the Corona Borealis, the northern crown, still visible on clear nights. Can you picture it? But not all who encountered Dionysus sought love or worship. Some sought only profit, and learned that the god of wine was also the god of consequences. In the kingdom of Phrygia lived King Midas, a man obsessed with wealth, who counted his gold each night and dreamed only of having more. One day, his servants found old Silenus wandering drunk in the royal gardens, lost, confused, separated from Dionysus's Dionysus during their travels through the east. Midas recognized the satyr from legends. Rather than mock or imprison him, the king treated Silenus as honored guest, feeding him, sheltering him, listening to his stories. For 10 days Midas cared for the old satyr. Then he personally escorted Silenus back to Dionysus, a kindness that surprised even the god himself. You have honored my foster father, Dionysus said warmly. Ask any boon, King Midas. Whatever you desire most, I will grant it. Midas did not hesitate. Let everything I touch turn to gold, he said, his voice thick with wanting. Pure gold, forever and always. Dionysus paused, something flickered across his face. Warning, perhaps, but a god's word was binding. Granted, he said softly. The golden touch is yours. Midas rushed home delirious with joy. He touched a stone, it became gold. A flower, gold. A pillar in his palace, pure, shining gold. He laughed like a madman. He touched his throne, his curtains, his walls. Gold everywhere, gleaming and perfect. He was the richest man in the world. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Then he grew hungry and reached for bread. It hardened to gold between his teeth. Wine turned to liquid metal on his tongue. He could not eat, could not drink. His little daughter ran to embrace him, worried by her father's strange expression. Papa, what's wrong? She asked, throwing her arms around him. Gold spread across her skin like frost across a window. Her eyes went solid metal. Her smile froze forever. His beloved daughter became a golden statue in his arms. Midas screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through his golden palace. He held the statue that had been his child and understood what he had done. He ran to find Dionysus, weeping golden tears that clattered to the ground like coins. Take it back, he begged. Please, God of mercy, take back your gift. Dionysus looked at the broken king with something like compassion. Go to the river Pactolus, he said. Wash yourself in its waters. The curse will pass from you. Midas ran to the river and plunged in. The water turned gold around him, then cleared. He touched a reed, it remained green. The curse was lifted. He returned home to find his daughter alive again. Flesh and warmth and laughter restored. Midas wept tears of salt and water. And they were the most precious things he had ever produced. From that day forward, Midas despised gold and lived simply. And Dionysus smiled, for he had given the king something worth more than all the world's treasure, wisdom. We have traveled far with Dionysus, from tragic birth to triumphant godhood. Now let us rest and consider what this ancient story truly meant. To the ancient Greeks, Dionysus was no simple wine god. He represented something essential, the wild heart that beats beneath civilization's careful order. Greek society was structured by rules. Who could speak, who could own property, who could move freely. Most people lived lives bounded by expectation and duty. Dionysus offered escape from those boundaries. In his worship, slaves and masters danced as equals. Women left their looms to run through mountains. Rules dissolved like morning mist. This was dangerous, of course. The myth of Pentheus warns what happens when ecstasy goes too far. When divine madness becomes murderous frenzy, destroying what it should free. But the Greeks understood that denying Dionysus entirely was equally dangerous. Pentheus tried to cage the wild, and the wild tore him apart. Repression breeds its own destruction. The wine god taught balance, not eternal order, not eternal chaos, but rhythm. Times for work, times for release. Days for duty, nights for celebration. Wine itself embodied this teaching. A little brings joy, loosens tongues, builds fellowship. Too much brings ruin, violence, degradation. The gift requires wisdom to use. Women especially honored Dionysus, for he offered what their society rarely did. A voice, a space, a moment of wild freedom beyond domestic walls. The monastic rites were not merely permission to misbehave. They were sacred. Encounters with the divine that left worshippers changed, renewed, more fully themselves. Theater grew directly from these rites. Actors in masks channeled gods and heroes, and audiences experienced emotions too large for ordinary life. Catharsis, the Greeks called it. To watch tragedy was to safely experience grief, terror, pity. Purging those emotions through art rather than life. Dionysus gave humanity a way to feel deeply without destruction. Now let us look deeper at the symbols woven through these tales. Each image carries meaning that the ancient Greeks would have recognized instantly. The grape is crushed to become wine. This violent transformation creates something more valuable than the original. Death becoming life, destruction becoming celebration. Dionysus himself was torn from his dying mother and reborn from his father's thigh. Like the grape, he passed through destruction to emerge transformed and glorious. The ivy that crowned his followers stays green even in winter. Symbol of life persisting through death's season, hope surviving when all seems lost. Leopards and panthers represented the wild nature tamed, but not destroyed. Dangerous beauty brought into harmony with the divine. Power serving rather than threatening. The serpent shed its skin and emerged renewed, ancient symbol of death and rebirth that predates human memory. In Dionysian worship, worshippers symbolically died and were reborn. The theatrical mask concealed the actor's face while revealing deeper truth. By becoming someone else, we discover who we really are. Paradox that lies at Dionysus's heart. The thyrsus looked harmless, mere fennel and pine cone, yet could strike with divine force. Never judge power by appearance. The gentlest things may hide the greatest strength. Even Dionysus's dual birth carried meaning. Born of woman, he knew mortality. Born of God, he knew divinity. He bridged both worlds, belonging fully to neither. This made him the perfect god for humans to approach. Not distant like Zeus, not alien like some Olympians, but connected to mortal experience through his mother's human heart. His rescue of Semele from the underworld promised that love could conquer even death, that the bonds between parent and child survived beyond the grave. Ariene's transformation showed that endings could become beginnings, that abandonment and betrayal need not define us, that new love rises from old grief. What universal truths shimmer beneath these ancient stories? Lessons that spoke to Greeks 3,000 years ago and speak to us still tonight. We cannot live by control alone. The careful structures we build to protect ourselves become prisons if we never allow release, never embrace the wild within. Those who deny truth about themselves or others invite destruction. Pentheus refused to see the god before him, and that blindness became his doom. Love proves stronger than death itself. Dionysus descended to Hades not for power or glory, but for his mother, and love opened doors that force never could. True wealth lies not in gold but in connection. In the embrace of daughter, the loyalty of friends. the simple joy of bread that nourishes and wine that warms. And transformation is always possible. The grape becomes wine, the mortal becomes God. The abandoned princess becomes eternal queen. Nothing is fixed, everything can change. The myths we've shared tonight did not stay in ancient Greece. They rippled outward through time, shaping art and thought for thousands of years. Greek theater, born from Dionysian rites, became the foundation of Western drama. Every play you've ever seen traces its ancestry to those masked dancers honoring the wine god. The great tragedians, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, wrote their masterpieces for festivals honoring Dionysus. Tragedy itself was sacred offering to the twice-born god. Euripides captured Dionysus's story most powerfully in The Bacchae, a play about Pentheus's doom that has haunted audiences for nearly 25 centuries. When Rome conquered Greece, they embraced the wine god and called him Bacchus. His worship spread across the empire, from Britain to Egypt to the eastern frontiers. The Bacchanalia, Roman festivals in his honor, grew so wild that the Senate eventually banned them, fearing their power to dissolve social order. Even emperors feared the god's influence. Early Christians saw echoes of their faith in Dionysus, a god who died and rose again, who offered wine as sacred communion, who promised transformation through devotion. Renaissance artists rediscovered the wine god with passion. Titian, Caravaggio, Rubens, all painted Bacchus in his glory, celebrating flesh and wine and joyous abandon. Caravaggio's young Bacchus gazes from his canvas with knowing eyes, beautiful and slightly dangerous, offering wine with a smile that promises transformation and threatens chaos. Titian painted Bacchus leaping from his chariot toward the abandoned Ariadne, capturing the moment rescue meets despair, one of art history's most romantic images. In the 19th century, philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche placed Dionysus at the center of his thought. He saw the wine god as essential counterbalance to reason. Nietzsche argued that Western culture had become too Apollonian, too rational, too controlled. It needed Dionysian energy to stay vital, creative. Psychology too found meaning in Dionysus. Carl Jung saw the god as representing the unconscious, those wild depths beneath our careful conscious minds that demand expression. Every concert where crowds lose themselves in music, every festival where strangers become friends through shared joy. These are Dionysus's modern temples, his worship continuing. The theater never forgot him. From Shakespeare to Broadway to the latest streaming drama, stories still work their ancient magic, transforming audiences through witnessed emotion. Wine culture spans the globe now, vineyards on every continent. The art of pressing and fermenting and savoring passed down through countless generations since Greeks first crushed grapes. And whenever someone raises a glass in celebration, at weddings, reunions, achievements, they unknowingly honor the twice-born god who taught humanity how joy could be shared. Dionysus lives on in every transformation, every ecstasy, every moment when we shed our careful selves and become something wilder, freer, more fully alive. And so we come to rest at last, dear traveler. We have journeyed far tonight, through tragedy and triumph, through death and glorious rebirth. We watched young Dionysus born in fire and saved by divine love. We saw him raised in hidden valleys, discovering the magic in simple grapes. We sailed with him across wine, dark seas, where pirates learned too late that some beautiful strangers should not be captured. Dolphins still remember that lesson. We stood with him in Thebes, where family denied him and paid terrible price. The god of joy showed that he could also be the god of consequences. We descended with him to the underworld itself, where love proved stronger than death, and a mother rose as goddess beside her devoted son. We found Ariadne weeping on lonely shores and watched despair transform to divine love. Her crown still shines among the stars, keeping her story alive forever. These stories were first told around fires long ago, by parents to children, by priests to worshippers, by friends sharing wine as night deepened around them. Those ancient voices are silent now, but their words echo still, in books, in art, in the stories we've shared tonight. We keep their memory alive by listening. The Greeks believed that speaking someone's name kept their spirit alive. So we honor Dionysus, Samael, Ariadne, and all who first gave voice to their tales. Thank you for traveling with us tonight through these ancient wonders. May the God of transformation bless your dreams with gentle change and sweet renewal. Let the wine, dark night wrap around you now like the softest cloak. Let stories carry you towards sleep like boats on the calmest sea. Rest well, dear friend. The twice-born God watches over all who honor the old stories. Until we meet again, sleep and dream of ancient wonders.